One of them, a serial entrepreneur. He's doing some crazy interesting things. You're going to want to watch this episode of Giant TV. My discussion with Brent was just off the hook. Loved it. I know you'll get some great takeaways. Let's go check it out. Hey everybody, welcome to Giant TV. Very fired up for this episode. I'm Paul Hitchcock, founder and president of Giant Jacks Media, where we help others to grow and nurture their businesses. Actually, this is our building here in Southern California and near Disneyland. And really excited to have Brent on here, Brent Robertson, Brent, you're doing a ton of stuff. You are a TED keynote speaker, Vistage speaker, and you are the co-founder of Fathom. You've got purpose practice going on. I mean, what aren't you doing? That's what I want to know. But welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And so I want to dive into this. I feel so lucky because in my job, I get to get connected to people like you, work with people like you who are highly entrepreneurial, doing some really interesting things, and I get to share that with others. So excited to bring this to other people. I know you and I have talked offline a bit, but tell us what are you focused on right now? What's front burner for you?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So, I'm here. I'm hailing from Milwaukee, Wisconsin on this particular call today on a speaking tour. And one of the things I'm really focused on and interested in is working with leaders who are really interested in how do I have greater effect with the time I spend on things, and where is the leverage? And I think we're in a time now where leaders would say, it is the to-do list is unending.
Yeah.
There's no end in sight, and there's so much more that we need to be responsible as leaders of modern organizations. How do we deal with that? And what I've been up to really these last 20 years is trying to really figure out as it relates to the effect of leaders is where is it we have greater effect, and where could we use our time more wisely, and where are we currently using our time with little effect? And one of those places is as it relates to listening. And so I've been brought in, Vistage and others, YPO and other organizations bringing me in to deliver this workshop. It's become quite popular around a really different approach to how we think about listening and what listening is for. And traditionally, listening is talked about from the standpoint of listening skills, those kinds of things. But the way I look at listening, it is one of the most, if not the most important thing that we can do. It is really a way in which we can use our listening, if you will, as a way to create a space. And the quality of our listening is going to create a certain quality of space. And inside of that space, things, ideas, and people can come into existence.
So I love that because nobody listens. It doesn't seem like people listen effectively today. People are talking at each other, which is a fair statement.
100%. I would say there's so many things that are culprits that get in the way of our listening. In fact, we're suffering from listening deprivation, meaning we need to have an experience of being listened to understand who we are and how much we matter. And we simply aren't making the time to do it. So what I help leaders understand is we have this innate capacity for listening that's quite powerful, and we're not using it. And so it's a process of reintroducing people to the capacity for listening that they already have and aren't using, and some techniques and practices to be able to use that capacity for listening really, really effectively, including simple things like taking responsibility for your listening and considering a precious resource, something we don't have very much of, and we need to treat it carefully. And so, for example, instead of wandering into a conversation that we typically do on a day-to-day basis, to take a moment and ask the other what kind of listening would benefit the conversation we're having right now. So you're not left to guess. Be intentional when you're asking for someone's listening, to be respectful of their time and say, hey, I want to have a certain kind of conversation with you. Do you have the capacity for it? To give you the opportunity to be able to say yes or no, or to prepare yourself for a particular kind of conversation. But there was this other point. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. A quick question on that. When you're talking about just to set the table on the listening, is this within the work environment and how leaders listen to their employees or management, or what's the application?
Yes, and in the exercises I do, the experience people have is, wow, I really could be using this at home.
Oh yeah.
For example, a lot of leaders will use up their listening at work, and their spouses and children get the leftovers when they get home, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
have the capacity. So how do I be mindful and more careful about my listening? And so, listening is one of those things where the ROI on it is enormous. It's like a 7 times ROI. A little really deep listening goes a very long way. How do we make it more intentional and thoughtful in doing it? But really what this is about is a larger conversation around the fact that traditional leadership and listening programs that are more skills based or ideology based simply aren't adequate for what's actually being called for leaders of a modern organization. And so I've been developing programming for the last several years in a new company called Be Generative that's standing up a new generation of programming that's really designed to fill that space between where traditional programs leave off and what is actually needed to prepare leaders for leading into a future without precedent. And of course, today's the slowest day of our lifetime. So let's enjoy it, right? Things are only going to get faster, more complicated. How do we equip ourselves to navigate that space of the unknown more successfully?
Is this new endeavor that you're focused on, is it about you going into businesses, working with leaders on exactly what? Is there a process? Is there mechanisms? Like what is it centered around?
Yeah, for sure. Well, here's a great little tidbit, right? The average executive wastes $100,000 a year per executive on unproductive meeting times.
Oh,
So just that in and of itself is what if we had a better strategy for our meeting strategy? How
oh
is it
yeah.
that we make sure we're having much more intentional and more powerful conversations? That in and of itself not only saves massive amounts of time and money, but if we're having higher quality conversations, it results in better outcomes, sharper and clearer action items, more energy, more relationship. Then we're able to move our organizations forward much more efficiently, much more productively, and create a much more enjoyable organization to work for. Right. So it certainly has massive benefits, and we have multiple programs specific to leaders and organizations. But this is really about life. And it's
Yeah.
about really how can we build our capacity to receive the amazing things that are all around us right now, that we're so busy and so distracted that we run right by them without ever taking the time to really enjoy the splendor of the life that we have right in front of us.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've got to say, when you brought up meetings, I hate meetings, group meetings, because of what you just said, right? They're just like, God, this could be done in like a 4-minute phone call. What are we doing? Oh my God, I just want to shoot myself when I
Yeah,
go to those things. Uh, that's fascinating. And so, Brett, when you're, who are you working with? Is it big Fortune 500 companies? What's your sweet spot? And then how does that interaction start with you when you're going in there?
sure. Yeah. So we focus on organizations that are primarily, we'll say, purpose driven and human centered. And so these are leaders that really want to have an impact on the world, a thriving business, but a business that's making a difference in the world, and also human-centered, meaning they prioritize their and their team's growth and development. And by and large, these organizations are wildly high performing based on that nature, right? It's kind of the
Mhm.
recipe of success.
Yep.
Where we begin in any engagement is really an understanding of, well, what's the reality of the organization and what are the aspirations of that organization, and what seems to be in the way. One of the ways I talk about it is, what if everything you ever wanted was on the other side of a conversation? As a 20-year veteran professional facilitator, my job is to design those conversations and facilitate those conversations, the ones that a whole lot of things are on the other side of. So that's what we really help organizations to find, is where are those conversations? Let's run toward them and let's have them really, really well, so we can get on the other side of them where all the great stuff is. And that's really where we help organizations to figure out where they're stuck.
Hmm. Do the organizations you work with, do they know they have a problem and they're seeking you out, or do you go in there and have to identify with them the problem areas?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say who we focus on are the successful and unsatisfied. Meaning, right,
Yeah, I love it.
the organization, and what's interesting, when an organization is really up to harnessing more of their future, it's less about fixing problems. It's much more about creating conditions that favor future. So that's even a different kind of conversation we'll introduce into an organization. Is by and large, a lot of things show up around us and we're well equipped and trained to understand problem solving and
Yeah.
fix it. And we could take a fix it mentality, but a fix it mentality isn't adequate to creating new future. You need to actually create conditions that favor the future you want. You can't fix your way there. And so we need to move into a different mindset of, it's not about fixing what's broken, because that assumes there's something that already exists that is needed in the future. It's much more about, okay, what's the future we want, and what do we need to pay attention to allow it to exist? And so much like farming, right? We need to create certain conditions in the soil and the environment that favor a certain crop. It's not fixing a problem. That's carefully cultivating certain conditions that then tip the cards in our favor for the future that we want. And that's not a place in which traditional leadership even talks about. We talk about, effective problem solving and looking at the world as a problem to fix, right? And that's fine, and it's important that we're really good at fixing problems. But there's that other domain that we can operate in, which is how are we creating conditions for future? And that takes a different kind of leadership, where a willingness to work in the unknown, in the creative space, much more than in the known, proven best practices space.
Yeah. Well, do you find that there is a common thread woven throughout the businesses you're working with of issues they're dealing with, things that pop up a lot?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that show up a lot are issues that um, one would say, like communication, for example. It's like, oh, we have a communication problem. I say, well, you don't have a communication problem per se. You have a communication condition that isn't being well cared for. It isn't a problem you'll ever fix. Communication always needs to be lovingly cared for on an ongoing basis, whether you like it or not. No different than my mentor Mel would always say, it's no different than taking a shower. There's nothing wrong with you that you have to take a shower, but you kind of lose friends and influence pretty quickly if you stop taking showers. Same with communication. We need to take good care of it. And communication is an ongoing thing, because our stories and narratives are a real-time unfolding phenomenon. So must our approach to communication. And depending on the nature of the change going on inside of your organization, for example, if you're at a time of rapid change, then we need to radically uptick the cadence and the amount of communication that's going on, much more real time, much like a sporting event, right? When you're moving on the field really quickly, there's no time delay between what's going on in the field and the coaching staff making decisions. Same in our organizations, and yet we rely on these like weekly, monthly meetings to tell everybody what's going on. That's absurd. How are we supposed to move quick enough, right? Things like that are common things that come up that are misrepresented as problems to fix. They're not problems to fix, they're conditions to care for.
Yeah, well said. Very interesting. And I when I think about communication in organization, I think about my own firms I work in and stuff. Seems like there's two elements to it. You're hitting on those. One is how you communicate with people effectively, but then also the channels for making that communication happen. Like you said, it's not a monthly meeting to make it happen, but there's two sides, right? It's how you're interacting with people, and then how you get that execute on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of it too, is right. If I understand, and this is something that again doesn't get thought of enough and makes a huge difference as it relates to communication. What's the intention of what I'm communicating? Do we even spend time getting clear about it? Okay, I got to say all this stuff. I've got this big agenda. Yeah, well, that's nice. What's my intention? Let's do the work there first. Get clear on the intention of the communication. What would a successful outcome of the communication be? Then it gives me a chance to stage, well, then what's the setup, environment, method to communicate that would allow for that effect to be greater? We don't even think about our intentions. We just get right into agenda and content. And in the absence of really understanding what we're trying to accomplish with our communication, we're left at a disadvantage because we're not considering the environment or the best methodology in which to bring that message forward.
Yeah, well, the thing that you said about how do you want me to listen to you, that's interesting, because you actually get people to do that, and that becomes a practice in a work environment. When someone, what is that, in a meeting, or someone approaches you and you say, whoa, well, stop. How would you like me to listen to you? Is that what you're talking about?
100%. So Paul, like, for example, when you and I first met, it's kind of like, hey, before we just dive into this thing, what's our intention for this conversation in the first place?
Yeah.
Or to ask you to say, hey, you know what? I've got something I want to talk to you about. Here's the kind of listening that would benefit me. And then you can say, great, now I know exactly what to provide. I don't have to sit here and guess. right?
Yeah. Yeah.
In the essence of understanding the kind of listening we can provide that's most beneficial, we will rely on our automatic, which is whatever listening muscle we've built the most. And for a lot of leaders, it's listening to fix, it's listening to
Oh, right.
respond, right? These
Right.
kinds of things. And what happens is, we build these really strong particular muscles for listening. They work well at work. They don't work so great at home, because when you go home, who wants to be fixed, right?
No, my kids don't at all. They don't, not at all.
Exactly. Yeah. Or listening as dad would be a listening style where you're offering wisdom by default instead of wisdom on request. That gets
Yeah.
annoying after a while as your kids grow up. Like, Dad, I don't need your wisdom. I just want to talk. Great.
100% true. 100% true. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's great because it's so interesting. I grew up in a huge family. Brent, I have massive dad's also 12, mom's 14. And I grew up around a kitchen table listening to my aunts and uncles talking about family. It's how I learned about my family and feel like I lucky and developed some good listening skills from a kid because I was a big talking family. I think, isn't that part of listening is knowing when to respond and somebody wants advice versus just listening and then also asking follow-on questions, which nobody does today. You say something, oh yeah, I went last week, I went on a really great vacation. Oh, great, I did too. I went on it. No one asks, well, where did you go? What did you do? Isn't that all part of it?
Yeah. I mean, the I'd say there's the experience we have of being in discourse with each other
Yeah.
that's something that comes with time and practice. And yeah, you mentioned, and I love that story you shared about your family, about how that just indoctrinated you into experiences of discourse and how to be in conversation in a really beautiful
Hmm.
way. I think what we need to get clear about first is what's listening for and why is it so important? Because if we are standing in that place when we listen, it's a much more powerful place. So, for example, listening is the most powerful investment you can make in another person, because if you want to send a message to another person that is undeniable and indelible that they matter, it happens through our receiving them and having them have the experience of being seen and heard.
That's great. That's
And so
great.
if we
Yeah.
think of
Yeah.
listening as that precious gift that we can bestow upon another, and a precious gift we need to receive, then all of a sudden your position, your posture in your listening is going to be much more sincere, genuine, and curious. And the
Hmm.
rest kind of takes care of itself if I understand, well, what's listening for? Like, oftentimes, because we're so busy, we end up pretending we're listening when we're not. The other knows it. And the message it sends is, you're not important. It sends
Yeah.
it so clearly. It
Yeah.
feels terrible to be faked, right? So I'd say if anyone's listening to this, here's the thing you should do first is don't fake your listening. If you don't have it, tell the other it's not there. I'm sorry, I'm distracted, I'm busy, whatever it is, I can't give you the listening you deserve. Just be sincere and honest about,
Good
to
point.
the degree which you have listening capacity or not. Do your friends, family, peers, and colleagues a favor. Don't fake it. It sends a clear message you don't matter. And is that
Yeah.
the message you want to send? If you want to
Yeah.
send a
Yeah.
message that you
Yeah.
matter, be fully present and listen.
Oh yeah. Just thinking about my kids. I'm going to take some of this home with me tonight because yeah, I mean, you can't fake it with the kids. They know if you're not listening or not.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
that's great. I could talk about this forever. I just love it. I want to tell everybody listening, wherever you're watching this, because we live stream this everywhere. It's LinkedIn, YouTube, X, Facebook, but I'm going to have Brent's information around this video. I highly recommend getting connected to Brent. I've seen a lot of your content, Brent. We're connected, of course. It's awesome. And then Brent, if someone's interested in understanding more about what you do or having you speak or working with you, do you have a sort of a complimentary session you do? You get on Zoom with somebody? How do you run that?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to find me. You can connect with me there, and we can set up a 15-minute session to
Yeah.
really get a deeper understanding of what it is that's going on that you're up to or challenged by, and see what makes the most sense that would be of benefit to you or your organization, whether it be individual coaching or a workshop or something else. We can work on that together.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks everybody for listening. Brent, thanks. I know you and I will stay in touch. Really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. This is really wonderful. Great to be here with you.
Yeah, thanks.